Welcome to Resilience Talk, hosted by Paul Spencer of Second Nature Solutions. Let's dive in.
Hello, Paul. Welcome back to another episode of Resilience Talk. Today is a different kind of conversation, if I may. Today is July 8th, 2025. There are a lot of things in the world today that people are experiencing, feeling, thinking about. And so I want to set the table for listeners, invite you to this meal that we're having. This is a very wide-ranging conversation, but it will make sense. So today, July 8th, there are different points of chaos and risk that people are experiencing. And it could start with the floods in Texas, where 100 people died. It could start more closer to home for some people, where they're experiencing loss of a loved one. They're experiencing climate change, if you will, fires. They're experiencing anxiety about their jobs. We're having somewhat of a slowdown in the economy today due to many different reasons. They could experience let's say social divisions or immigration raids, or they could be experiencing financial loss. There's just so many different aspects of life that people are experiencing, and it can feel very heavy. And I'm experiencing different things, just personally. I know you are. A lot of people listening are. And there's this sense of anxiety or hopelessness that almost everyone I talk to is feeling this way. We had a weekend at church a couple of weeks ago where the pastors were just like, hey, let's just pray for each other. Like, what is going on in your life? From the stage, what is going on in your life? Let's share. And every person that talked was just this devastating thing, one after another. And it felt so heavy. And in times like these, it creates this sense that we have to cling to something and feel this sense of like resilience, because we need hope and we need faith in a time like this. And there's this scene in The Crown from a couple of seasons ago where this nun is walking into a room. I think it was a nun walking into this room, and she's like, how is your faith? That's what she said. How is your faith? And I know, Paul, you and I have talked a lot over the last couple of weeks, and we've had so many wide-ranging conversations, but you keep going back to that. Where is your faith in a time like this? So, Paul, tell me about the things that you're thinking about these days and how your faith is integrating maybe into this world, into this season that so many people are feeling. And what's drawing you back to that sense, and how folks might be able to have that faith, that hope, that love to get them through a hard time. And of course, it will impact things in the future and how we're thinking about our businesses in this tumultuous period. It could be AI, again, it could be climate and energy crises. It could be, different issues within their business that they're facing, the economy, tariffs, so on. What is it for you that your faith takes you into this place, and how do you navigate it? Where is your faith today, Paul, in this season?
Yeah. So I would hope that I have high faith, and I hope to practice high faith. There's always room for improvement, for sure. And I think just going back to what you were just saying is that we're all feeling with the age of transition, right? Things that are going on that we've talked about already. It just feels like it's amplified, and there's no space. There's no calm space. Whether it's geopolitical things around the world with wars and attacks and all those things, all the way down to like what you just said, which could be the flash floods in Texas and the horrific loss of life there, or even just like you said at home where we lose a family member, right? And all of that goes back to where's your faith? Because in the end, resilience is based on faith and hope. And without those things, it's very difficult to cope with whatever is going on in your life. So even if we were in the age of the golden era and things were all awesome and stable and nothing but good things, we still have events in our lives where our business goes under, right? Or we have a car crash, right? Diego Jota, right? He was a soccer player that died over the weekend unexpectedly, right? With his brother. They were the only two siblings in the family. Life is, not without knowing their personal situations, but from the outside, life is perfect, right? On a soccer team, living the dream, and it's gone. And so those are the things where we have to be able to we have to be able to go through the exercise and be able to say to ourselves, if I strip everything away, if I take all the material things that I've worked my butt off for, and I take away my house, my home, and then I take away my money and my wealth. And for a lot of us, especially as business owners, we have some identity built into that as an owner, and as for some of the toys that we may get as maybe part of the privilege of ownership. And that doesn't mean fancy cars and big house and yacht, but there's a different perspective in the world, like what we've talked about before. You have a different wisdom to share when you operate as an owner, and those are blessings. But we also have a strong identity into that. And so when that business goes away, there's lots of owners that have a difficult time of dealing with that. It's really difficult because my identity is now gone. Now my business, and people knew me as this awesome business owner, and how's your business? And when that's gone, it's like taking away myself, right? My soul. And so then that goes back to the question of where's your faith? And then again, just kind of going through that, take away the wealth, our material things, and then we take away what was most likely most dear to us, and that's our family. And it's just left, you're just left, right? With nothing. And we say, where's your faith? Because nothing is ever perfect. I think we've talked about this before when we're running a resilient business and we're thinking about all these things that Paul talks about and processes and risk management. That doesn't mean that you win. And it doesn't mean that it's a happy path. And if you do it right, if you do it just like Paul says, or if you read these 4 books, you do them just like that, it will be perfect for you, right? You can do all those things and still, quote unquote, fail and lose everything, right? And the last thing that you have, the only thing that you have, is your faith. And that is the only pillar, right, that you have that goes through you, out, up, right, straight to God, that says, this is all I have, right? That's all I have. All I have is a relationship with Him. All I can do is rely on Him, and it's up to Him, even if I don't like it and I don't like the outcomes. And that faith will allow me to have some hope that even though it's full of despair and loneliness and not much fun, I still have hope. And that hope is that there's something on the other side, right? Yeah, regardless of all the things that are going on in the world, and with me personally, that there's something else, right? Something bigger than me. And God has something in store for me besides just this, and that is hope, right? And those are the two things that without those things, it's really hard to love. And I know in society today, especially in our world today, we're asked to love and to love, and we can do that. But it does feel there's a lot of hopelessness behind the asks of love, right? And you can't force people to love, but you can have faith and hope that there will be love, right? So those are different virtues, obviously, within where's your faith. But I think it's worth the thought for you all listening to take the exercise and to say, where is my faith? And when it's all stripped away, where am I? And if that doesn't feel very good, and I wouldn't expect it to feel great, and I wouldn't expect it to feel good, but if you know that there's a gap there, right? And I don't really know where my faith is, or I don't have a strong faith, or I've lost hope, then that's a place to go to work.
I like that you ended on the word work, because in my mind, I could hear people thinking, this sounds a bit woo-woo. You're talking about love and faith and hope. But this, what you're describing is actually very difficult. There's a phrase that people describe, the true philosopher is someone who, when a tyrant comes into town, they can pick up all their belongings in like a suitcase, head out of town, and they can be content. Mm-hmm. And there's also the book of Job, where you have this faithful person who endured the worst suffering, and they were content with the Lord.
Yeah.
I wonder...
maybe just real quick, not to interrupt you, but content is one thing. Did he like it? Did he suffer? Did he cry? Did he wonder why? Of course, right? Of course. It's who we are. But he still had the faith, right?
And there's contentment, and then there's joy. Joy. Because the Bible instructs you should have joy in your sufferings. Mm-hmm. Take joy that you are suffering in this moment. James says that. Paul says that.
Yes.
That sounds really difficult.
Yeah, of course.
But that's the point. It takes work, and I'm curious, like, what your thoughts are on, like, this is really tough. I mean, I'm going to a counselor on Thursday. I'm in therapy, because to do this kind of like really intense soul work, especially as a business owner, that is not easy. And this is not something you can just like do overnight. And here's the 6-step plan to do this and that. Mm-hmm. I mean, it takes years of really plumbing the depths of who you are as a person, mm-hmm. and how that affects you as a father, as a mother, as a business owner. So talk to me a little bit about that. Maybe that's a good place to start, is like, where do you even begin to like find where your faith is and like who you are as a person in this day, as an owner, as a person trying to just navigate the complexities of the world right now?
Yeah. Well, I think that's different for each person.
Yeah.
But I would say that the gift of awareness, right, is a miracle in our lives, right? And so just by hearing the first several minutes of what we've been talking about is the gift of awareness. And so now it's been articulated in a way, and maybe you don't quite get it, but you hear it. And you know in your heart where your faith is, right? And you may be agnostic, right? You may be an atheist. You may be maybe a passive believer, or you may be a strong believer. But you know in your heart, because God gives us that consciousness in our heart to know where we stand, right? And so that's the awareness that I hope to give to you, anybody who's listening. And then it's up to you to understand what that means for you. And I would say, and maybe even challenge you, that you know what it is. You know the answer. I don't know the answer. Brandon doesn't know the answer. You know the answer because God has probably told you a number of times. And whether you are listening or not, you may not have taken the advice, right? So what does that look like, right? Again, that's up to you and your circumstance, and really, again, just saying, you know what it is. So that could look like a long lost friend or relationship or relative that you haven't been in touch with in a long time, but it's been on your heart for a long time to rekindle that relationship, right? And who knows why, and who cares the reaction of, hey, where have you been, right? But who knows what will open up, right, if you follow your heart. And following your heart means that God has given it to you for whatever reason, and who knows what will show up in that time, right? So that's one example. Another one could be that maybe there's a group, maybe a friend of yours, or maybe that something that you've seen either in your church or in your business groups, networks, that you've been invited to a number of times and you've never gone. Because of whatever reason. And maybe it's on your heart that now that you have this gift of awareness that you've always felt that you've wanted to go, or you should have gone, right? And we don't always want to should on each other. But, and so maybe it's now taking that step to go do that, right? Or maybe it's, I spend a lot of time with lots of different people, lots of different groups. I have good relationships, but, Paul, I don't have any time for myself. And so maybe there's some alone time that you can give yourself. And that one's a little harder because the other ones I described are kind of in your heart, meaning you have this kind of tug that maybe I missed out or something, or I really want to do that, but where the things for yourself are a little harder to realize. But again, the gift of awareness right now is there can be some time for yourself. Go for a walk, read a book, drive away somewhere and sit on a park bench, right? And just give yourself some time. And those are things that silence, right? Reflection, those are all spiritual methods of increasing your faith and just relaxing, right? So those are a few things that come to mind.
What comes to mind for me is poetry. What I mean by that is you can't read poetry quickly. You have to sit and stop and look at the words and let them kind of sit with you. And you have to mull them over. You can't read it like you would an email. And there's this great book by a guy named John Mark Comer, and it's called The Ruthless Elimination of Hurry. And he says that hurry is not of the devil, hurry is the devil. And he's quoting somebody else, but he's got this great thing called Practicing the Way that talks about silence and Sabbath and solitude and all these practices of the spiritual life. But your point on awareness makes me think that you have to stop moving for a minute to be able to have that awareness. Like there's all these things that are going on outside, inside, in your soul, in your heart, in your mind, but also around you. I've got a 2.5-year-old and a 5-week-old baby. I've got my wife and
congratulations,
a business. Thank you. But but it is very, very difficult to slow down, to make space and margin in your life, especially as a business owner, to be able to even begin to think about and have the awareness and the presence of mind to sit with your own thoughts and your own being, who you are on the inside. I think it was Blaise Pascal that said that the stem of the chief problem for all men is that they're not able to sit in the room quietly by themselves. And I think there's something to that. How do you even begin to stop and slow down when you're running a business? You've got a family, you've got a spouse and kids, and you got baseball practice on Thursday and you got to run and do it. You just drum
for
yourself
sure.
up. How do you stop?
Yeah, so there's a thing that probably most of you have seen, especially if you work with me, is the wheel of life.
Yeah.
So on there, like it's a wheel, and then each spoke is a 1 through 10, right? And then it has fitness, maybe intimate relationships, friendships, spiritual life, business life, right? There's a whole slew of things that go around there. And the concept of it is you score yourself as a snapshot in time, right? And if you have some 8s and some 9s and some 7s and some 6s and a 4 and then some 8 and a 9, and you draw the wheel, you can see that you got a flat tire, right? And if you were to roll that wheel, it'd go dunk, 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 dunk. So it gives you an opportunity to, again, create some awareness to say, oh, look, in my spiritual life, maybe there's more things that I can do. Because it's very natural, actually, for all of us to say, geez, I want to go to the gym. I want to go for a walk. I want to ride the bike. I want to get in better shape. And so we can create those goals, right?
Yeah.
And business, I got to be able to have one-on-ones, and I got to make sure I get a board and think about these strategic things that I'm going to do with my business. And I'm going to take Mandy out for dinner once a month. And those are tangible things that we can implement, if you want to call it that, to make our wheel a little smoother. The one thing that's more intangible that you just described is the spiritual side of things, right? Which is, it does force you to slow down in order to move that number up, right? You have to intentionally say, I'm going to let go today with all the things that I have swirling around me in my business. And I'm going to take 15 minutes to go pray, right? Or I'm going to take 15 minutes just to go for a walk outside of the office through the beautiful trees and path that we've got in the back of our office, which I have never seen because I'm always busy in front of the computer and on the phone, right? Yeah. And I can take that 15 minutes to pray, to reflect, to relax, and give myself permission not to think about anything, right? And so when your question is what does it take?
Yeah.
It takes courage to do that. It takes courage to be able to say, the business will be here tomorrow. The work will be here tomorrow and the next day. If I spent the next 24 hours, 72 hours, 120 hours, I will not be done with work. There will still be work at the end of that, right? And so to have courage to be able to say, you know what, I'm going to let that go, and I'm going to take some time for myself, and I'm going to say, where's my faith? And you'll be amazed to how much everything else on that wheel goes when you have a high evaluation of yourself, of spiritual side of things, right? If you rate yourself as a 10 or even a 12, right? We could go to 11, right? On our scale, and everything else is less than that. When you have high faith, high spiritual awareness, right? And you have the courage to give yourself that time and that space to be able to build that up, everything else is much simpler. And you become different. Those around you, either at home or in our family, our friendships, or our work relationships, they notice a difference in you, for sure. Yeah.
Can confirm. I want to emphasize, this is not for the people who read poetry on a Tuesday afternoon. This is for people that are running businesses. I mean, I've got an insurance application I need to fill out for compliance purposes.
Yes.
I've got 101 emails in my inbox, and among them are a private equity deal. I've got to get back to clients. I got to put plans together. I'm running a team.
Yeah.
And for you, I know there's a million things you need to do. There's millions of dollars at stake for the leaders listening and
Yes,
their
for
families
sure.
and putting business, putting
Yeah.
bread on the table because of their businesses. And yet the spiritual, quiet soul work is actually some of the most important things they could be doing for their business, for their families.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. When we do executive coaching, 9 times out of 10, it goes back to time for yourself. So how do I become an effective leader? How do I become more efficient in my work? How do I handle all the things that you're just talking about? There are tools and tactics and different ways of having conversations, but in the end, the question is how much time are you providing for yourself? And really, that most of the time, the answer is, I don't know what you're talking about. What do you mean time for myself? Like that's not even a consideration. But that's where you start. And then that goes back to, right, once you have some more time, you have some more reflection, then you can start asking yourself, where's my faith? Because it's at that point in time where you can really start to see what's going on around you, right? How are you leading your family? How are your kids? What is their well-being, right? How are the people around me from a coworker perspective? If you can slow that down by having some time for yourself, you'll start to see those things around you, right? And then your faith will play a lot into how you handle where you want to go with those things.
With the last few minutes that we have left, how do you see these practices, even if you will, and thinking about our faith in the future of how it affects people's businesses, their resilience? I mean, we've talked before about AI. We've talked before about conflicts overseas, about social strife. There's 1,000 different ways you could take this, but what is the value of somebody implementing these practices now for future benefit amidst this age of transition, this kind of like chaotic environment we find ourselves in?
It's a little bit like the Matrix. So the more when we do the energy coaching, right? There's the different levels, and not all of you are going to be familiar with this, but the lower levels of energy, and these are just, it's just a construct to be able to understand how you interact with the world and what your reactions, emotions are. So if we think about level one is somebody who is a victim, right? And that energy is very palpable. Somebody who says, oh, it's like, it always happens to me. And no matter what, oh yeah. And then you're never going to believe this, but this happened to me again. And of course, right? And then you have the other energy level, which is also a low resonating, which means it takes energy away from people. When you interact with somebody like that, it's okay. It's not wrong necessarily. And you can give them some empathy and some compassion. But if that's the way that they live, it's very draining for the other person.
Yeah, right.
Right? Another one that's very draining is somebody who is very aggressive, right? Maybe more conflict oriented, somebody who has more anger. So instead of saying, it's more like, I can't believe this is happening to me, right? People are crazy. I am not putting up with this anymore. And if you get in the way, right, I'm going to take you down with me. And there's no way you're going to talk to me that way. There's no way you're going to, right? And no matter what happens in their lives, it's always a conflict. And you're never going to beat that person. And that's their mentality. You cannot beat me, even if I have to, like, just go at you, right? And that's very draining to be able, and again, not wrong in certain situations and certain times of life, but if it's the way you are, it just sucks the life out of everybody else. It's just very draining, right?
Yeah.
So when you're, again, going back to the faith idea, is more of a faith is a high faith, is that things happen around you kind of in this matrix way, and you're more, you have a better coping of what's going on. Not that it doesn't matter, but you have a different hope and faith lens about why things are happening. And even if you don't understand why they're happening and it's terrible, just take the floods in Texas, right? And that counter of deaths especially with the children, just heartbreaking, right? And you don't need to understand why. And you actually read the news, and now it's like, who's going to be held accountable for this? And right? And we're talking about something that likely is not all that preventable, right? Maybe there could have been different decisions, but at the time, yeah. And so, do I still have faith and hope in the world, even though that happened? That's where your faith comes in, right? If I lose hopelessness and I get angry and I become a victim of what's going on, it's like, well, I might be taken away in the next catastrophic flood. It's not going to serve you, and it's not going to serve those around you. And so when you have a strong faith, you have more of a understanding of how you cope with it and how you pray for those people, how you pray for yourself, and you leave it up to our Father. It's not up to us. No matter how much we press on it and get angry about it or whatever else, it's up to Him, and we let it go, right? And if we can let it go and let Him have it and let Jesus take it, then that is a big difference in how we operate in our lives.
Amen. I'll leave it with that. I think this is some of your most important work. And I'm saying this now, realizing how difficult it is to just be a business owner in this world, a father, a husband, and I can do all the technical, tactical things in the world. But if I don't have this, what you're describing as faith and this kind of centered being, I don't have anything.
Yes, that's right. And like you said, right, it takes work, it takes discipline, and it takes others. It's very difficult to do it by yourself. And really, it's hard to do it by yourself. And this is one of the capitals that we talked about, right? We talked about intellectual capital, social capital, right? Spiritual capital. And without the spiritual capital, it's very difficult to move through there. You can be an academic, you can have a high intellectual capital, very smart, very knowledgeable, but in order to gain a lot of wisdom, you have to have spiritual capital. You have to have spiritual capital. And you can have social groups, high social network, high social capital. Without spiritual capital, you tend to wonder, are those social networks really serving me and serving others? Yeah. Right. So it feeds into all of that.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
You can be humbled if you don't have the spiritual capital. You can have all the intellectual or financial or social capital in the world. And if you don't have the spiritual, you can be humbled very quickly. That can go away.
Or you lack the ability to be humble.
Yeah.
And pride and ego take over, right?
That's right. Paul, thank you. I would love to keep talking about this, and I know we'll have some more resources coming out about it, but I highly encourage anybody listening to reach out to Paul and talk with him about these things. We've talked about it personally many times over the years, and it's always like coming back to like the most important things in life. And so I highly recommend reaching out to Paul and working through these things. And I know we'll talk about it again in the future because we are in that age of transition where it's becoming increasingly important. Yeah. So Paul, thank you. We'll talk again soon.
All right. Check you later.